There's been so much going on in the chess world that I feel that some events have just kind of flown by and I haven't been able to devote as much time to them as I wanted to. So I'm going to go back a couple of weeks to the London Chess Classic. Now, the elite event was won by Norbek Abasatorov. Right after that was the London Super Rapid tournament that had, well, something like 350 entrants. And there was a different winner to this tournament. So I'd like to look at a game from that event, and it's between Nicolas Theodorou from Greece, playing white. Now he's 25 years old, studied in St. Louis, but now giving it a go as a professional. And, he's making rapid progress. And playing black, Lenier Dominguez, 42 years old, originally from Cuba, but been representing USA for some years now. And he's been in the world's elite for, 20 years. And this game features the London system, which some people absolutely love. And for other people, it's the bane of their lives. This is a really interesting game because it features an opening variation for white, which is a little bit different. And middle game strategy for both sides, I think, is very interesting indeed. So let's take a look. Theodorou playing white, d4, d5, and the knights came out, and bishop f4. There we go, the trusty London system. Lots of ways to meet it. You can play a kingside fianchetto, or, well, very classical from Dominguez. That's what I would expect from him. e6, he's quite an orthodox player. c5. Now you could say here the normal moves are either knight d2 or c3, and then this is, you could say, the starting point of the main line. But Theodorou plays in a different way. I should say that normally the bishop ends up on d3 in this kind of position, with potential to attack on the king side. But watch how Theodorou plays it. He goes bishop e2. Well, it looks like a very modest development. So what's the idea behind this? Well, let's suppose black plays knight c6. I should say that Dominguez actually played queen b6 in this position. But let's suppose that black plays the normal moves here. Castles and then bishop d6. The idea is this, that white will exchange on c5 and then play c4. And this actually transposes to a variation of the Queen's Gambit declined and the bishop f4 variation. The knight's going to come to c3. And that's very strategic. I mean, you could argue that white perhaps has a very slight advantage, but it's certainly a very different kind of game to the usual attacking ideas of the London system. In any case, Dominguez does something different. Queen b6. Watch out for this pawn. But knight c3. Now, it would be inadvisable to play queen takes b2 because of knight b5. And something very nasty is going to happen here. And probably something very nasty happening to the queen as well. So bishop d7 played by Dominguez. Obviously, the bishop controls the b5 square, so no knight b5. Castles, there is really no need to defend that pawn. If queen takes b2, okay, this is very typical. Of course, the knight is attacked, so queen e1. But very soon, the rook is going to come here and white has a huge initiative. Okay, let's go back. So a6 instead. Queen d3. Okay, connecting the rooks. So, yeah, obviously taking here, still not very good because a rook will come to b1 and, well, the queen could be in trouble, but worst case, white will take on b7. So Dominguez just exchanges and develops knight c6. And notice pawn came to a6 to stop that knight b5 move. a3. you can see that white is playing in a very different way to the normal kingside attacking moves. So we're going to see the exact point of this in a second. But first things first, if queen takes b2, then yeah, that actually traps the queen. Okay, so bishop e7 played in the game. And b4. So this is very unusual. White is actually starting to gain space on the queen side, a very different strategy to the normal kingside hacking. Knight a4, the queen drops back, and knight c5. Well, straight away that looks pretty good. Black certainly doesn't want to exchange off bishop for knight, because that will leave, well, probably b takes, and that leaves the bishop able to come in here, for example. So the bishop dropped back. Very modest. Rook e1. Okay, that's generally where the rook belongs in this kind of position on the semi-open file. Also possible just to throw the knight in on the outpost, actually. I mean, that looks very tempting. But rook e1, nice and steady. b6. So the knight is driven back, and the bishop comes to I was going to say the long diagonal, but the diagonal is pretty short when there's a pawn on d5. But this sort of regrouping, well, black has achieved something because the knight has had to come back to b3. And it's not on a great square on b3 because these squares are controlled. And of course, it can't move to d4. c3. Rook c8. Okay, there's potentially some attack on the c-file. Theodorou plays rook c1. I'm not sure about rook c1. It seems a little bit overcautious. But remember, it's a rapid play game. You just kind of make these moves without thinking too much. I mean, this kind of position, time isn't such a factor. Knight e4 played. Okay, that doesn't look bad. I mean, at this point, I think Dominguez has done pretty well. Knight d2. Certainly, white is a very long way from gaining any kind of initiative, any kind of attack on the king side. Bishop d6. So that dangerous bishop is exchanged off, and knight takes. So black has played very sensibly, very solidly. These pieces look pretty good. I love that knight on d6 actually, looking at these key squares in the position, particularly c4 and b5. But, you know, white also has a pretty sensible position. Pawn on c3 is backward, but certainly black isn't attacking that at the moment. Queen g3. Well, that's a beautiful square for the queen. Looking down the diagonal, also looking at the king side as well. Not that white can generate any kind of kingside attack at the moment, but it is a beautiful spot for the queen. I might come back to this moment actually, because it has great significance. Knight e7 played. Well, it looks pretty reasonable, opening up the rook, potentially swinging the knight round to the king side, attacking the queen. But this is a really interesting moment. So my question for you is, how do you play as white in this position? So white to play. I think this definitely is a think and drink moment. So I've got my mug of tea ready. So I'm very proud to bring this think and drink moment to you in association with Millennium Computers. And I've partnered with them to bring out a limited edition chess set. And you can see that in this little clip. Cheers. I've seen many chessboards in my life, but when I heard about this one, I was keen to see it for myself. It's beautiful and completely wireless, thanks to an integrated battery and Bluetooth connection. For my edition, I wanted pieces that reflect clarity. When I play with them, everything feels natural. Just me, the board, and the game I love. This is my supreme chess set, the Daniel King edition. That's a great gift for those that would like to play online but would prefer to use a real board and pieces. Do check it out. Right, back to this position. White play, what did you come up with? Theodorou played a4. It's an excellent move. And from this moment on, I think black is in some trouble. Or at least the initiative swings over to white. So it's all about improving the prospects of this knight on b3. So if white can get in a5, knock out the pawn on b6, then the knight will be able to land on that beautiful c5 square. So for example, here, a5, I mean that's already very pleasant, the bishop under attack, the pawn under fire. Or b5, knight c5. Well, that is white's dream. What a knight. Looking at those points. So that's why after a4, Dominguez played a5. That's very understandable. And Theodorou exchanged. And the knight came to c5 anyway. Now, at least this way, there's no pawn on a6 that's under attack. Nevertheless, that's still a rather beautiful square for the knight. Shuts out the rook, attacks the bishop. So bishop c6. And finally, this bishop reaches this beautiful diagonal, striking down towards black's kingside. And now you can sense, yeah, this is starting to happen. So h6, yeah, the pawn, h7 pawn would always be vulnerable. So h6 is kind of sensible. Rook b1, yeah, let's put a rook on open file, why not? Queen c7, and knight b3, so that supports the knight and also looks at the a5 pawn. Rook d8, it's actually quite hard for black to find a decent strategy here. I do love that queen on g3 because I think endgames are going to be really nice for white. After the exchange, then a5 could be really vulnerable, and living with that knight on c5 is not easy for black. h3, a very modest move, but there is no need to rush this one. You know, white is in control here. So just giving the king an escape square. Bishop b8. Yeah, I'm not absolutely clear what that move is doing, but it just shows that white has real control here. And I like this. Switching the rook back to the semi-open e-file. Looking down here, you never know. Later on, there might be a chance to move to e3 and then g3. Hard to say. But anyway, in these kind of positions, we just know the rook belongs on e1. And in fact, there could already be a threat to take here and recapture with the knight. And there could be two threats there. Got to be careful because there's going to be a knight f5 at some point. But you can see how tactics start appearing when the rook is on the semi-open file. I've done this so often in this kind of position with white, but also with colours reversed in the Queen's Gambit declined for black. Okay, Queen a7 played. So I suspect that Dominguez saw the outline of this kind of tactic and just thought, right, I'm moving the queen away. Queen f4. Well, we're going to see what that one's about in a second. Rook b8 and g4. Very interesting. So there is potential to break open with g5. It's interesting. Very often I'm really against this kind of move, advancing the pawn in front of your king. But here, because the centre is, well, how can I put it, semi-closed, then white can get away with this move. Rook b6. And before things build up too much, Theodorou decided to drop the knight back. There was a rook exchange. Now knight c8. So this knight is looking to swing over here. But, you know, black's pieces are somehow so concentrated on the queen side, in the centre. There's very poor connection to the king over here. And therefore, this attack is absolutely logical. You know, in a sense, white is playing with an extra queen on this side of the board. Knight b6. Well, positionally, it's all very nice. You know, these knights looking at this square, the knight looking at a4. But look what's happening on the king side. The king is in trouble. If h5, well, it doesn't keep the position closed because g6 opens things up, undermining the support of the pawn on e6. So an exchange on g5, queen g5, rook c8. Yeah, that rook was attacked by the queen. h5, this is starting to look very, very serious. I mean, really, black would like to defend with the queen along the 7th rank and play, for example, f6. But after queen g3, then the knight would attack e6, and the queen attacks the knight on d6. So obviously, very, very good for white. Well, Dominguez played here, knight takes a4. And, well, here's your next moment where I think we should have a think and drink moment. So I'll have a drink, you have a think. How would you play here with white? So cheers. Rook b7 is the winning move. Beautiful. Really beautiful. It's all about breaking the connection between the queen and the king side. Let me explain it. I mean, of course, white would like to attack and threaten mate with h6. But then f6 actually defends. You can see the queen swoops across the board. And after queen g3, in fact, this is just a very unclear position after this and knight f5, for example. And it's a real mess. But yeah, basically, the key point is that the queen is able to defend g7. Now, watch what happens after rook b7. Well done if you spotted this one. It's very neat. Queen's attacked. So knight takes b7. And this time, h6 is winning. Because the knight blocks the queen. Queen g7, mate threatened. If king f8, the king can't run. I mean, lots of moves win, but that's pretty good. And the game went g6, and then simple as you like, queen f6, and that was the final move of the game. And there's no decent defense to queen g7 if king f8. Well, we can do that one again. That's not bad. And mate next move. So that was the final position. I really like that game. You know, the London system is something that you kind of feel your way through. It's actually very, very strategic. And I find it fascinating that white played with the very modest bishop e2. But eventually, you know, after a very nice queenside initiative here with a4, eventually turned towards the king side. Once that knight was established on c5, which cuts out any counterplay for black on the queen side, then white could turn to the king side. And yes, the good old g-pawn entered the attack and absolutely sparkling finish with rook b7. So yeah, I love the kind of global nature of White's strategy in that game, and it was only a rapid play game. So very impressive performance from Nicolas Theodorou, who won the London Chess Classic Super Rapid with an absolutely blistering score of 9 out of 10. And what I really like about the performance, well, many things I like about it, but in the final round, he defeated Abdusattorov. Let's find that game. Hang on. Here we go. He defeated him with, yes, wait for it, the Kalashnikov. Well, that's a story for another day. But it was a pretty convincing victory, actually. So congratulations to Nicolas Theodorou from Greece, and we wish him well in his quest to make great strides in the chess world. He's now entered the top 100 in the world, and yeah, he's working really hard at his game. Thanks for watching.